All right, we are coming to you live from our new home, reimagined Wise Up 2.0.
Wise Up Redux.
Where are we?
We are in a brand new, awesome, kind of repurposed, given some extra love to it. We're not in a barn. I know it looks like that with the chicken wire behind us, but it's actually it's part of the building at the messenger office. It used to be a photo studio. Then we rented it out to some people, and now it's a photo studio again. And it is, I guess, our multimedia broadcasting epicenter of greatness.
Yeah, a lot of great things are going to come out of this room. While we also have, we've kind of expanded our studio. We've also expanded our talent. This with Wise Up 2.0, we've brought on a member of the community you might know. His name's Josh Henry. He has been working for the Bridgeport Police Department for a little while. You've probably seen him in a lot of community events. But it's kind of funny. So I met Josh doing a story probably about 3 or 4 years ago. He had just graduated Mayborn and was looking into getting into maybe potentially the radio industry, and had a passion for sports, had a passion for broadcasting, and I did a little story because he does have an interesting path to where he is now. In 2012, he suffered a spinal cord injury, and that derailed, I guess, his racing career. He was a race car driver, just a really solid dude, and gotten to know him over the years, just seeing him at events or just seeing him around town, and always good to talk to. And we actually started off. He was helping us out with sports a little bit. I was like, wait, didn't you want to do radio? So this is our opportunity to actually have Josh help us out in a really awesome and unique way. And I think while we're the Leering Press, the media favorability ratings are not great right now.
In the basement.
So I think this will give us an opportunity to have, a community member perspective to the podcast.
And like you said a minute ago, you said we're bringing new talent into the fold. We're bringing the first talent ever into the fold. A guy who actually knows some stuff about this. So yeah, couldn't be more pleased to officially bring on Josh Henry to Wise Up 2.0.
What's up, Josh?
Thank you. What's up? How's everyone doing?
Good, man. Thank you so much for helping us out. Honestly, we're excited to have you on. But before we fully begin your hosting career on the Wise Up podcast, want to just fill our listeners, our viewers in on who you are.
Right. So let's get it.
Josh, so first off, where'd you grow up?
So I was born in a small town in northwest Oklahoma called Buffalo, Oklahoma, and lived there from 1995 to 2004, and ended up moving to Canadian Texas up in the Northeast Panhandle. And when I say Canadian Texas, people are like, "Oh, you're from Canada?" It's like, no, it's a little town in Panhandle. So yeah, lived there for about 9 years, almost 10, and graduated from there in 14. And then moved to Bridgeport, Texas in, I think it was June 14 that same year.
So have you been working, how long have you worked at the Bridgeport Police Department?
So I've been there part-time for, I want to say 2 years. And I was volunteering there from approximately January to November of 21, and then got hired in November 30th of 21, and been there part-time ever since.
And I guess, do you think that you've gotten a unique perspective on law enforcement from your time there, and kind of?
Definitely so. So I started out doing just filing cases in a cabinet. Literally, our administrative supervisor, Holly, she would bring me cases, and I'd just put them in a filing cabinet, store it away, and go home for the day. And then progressively learned more about kind of case management and how that works. And to where I am now, where anytime someone, gets arrested, the case comes to me, I will get it prepped and ready to be sent on to the county or district attorneys, and I'll prep the case file, and then bring it on over here to Decatur to the attorney's offices, whichever it may be, and file them there. It's kind of out of our hands from there.
And how did that job opportunity come about?
Well, Chief Stanford and I, we all go to Grace Fellowship there in Paradise. And one Sunday, in between services, he approached me. Was like, "Hey, man, I know you just graduated, and you're not really in a job anywhere. I just wanted to, know if you'd want to come check out what we're doing here at the police department, and if you would like to volunteer and see what develops from there." And I was like, "Heck yeah! I mean, anything to get me out of the house for a few hours." And that's what we did, and been there, like I said, volunteered almost a year. And during one of our department meetings, Chief Stanford was like, I just got to point out, anybody who can show up, on their own time and volunteer and do this job for free and consistently come in, bust their butt. I've got to be able to recognize that and, give them a shot at, being employed. It's like, I can't just say, "Oh, thanks for your service," and then adios. He's like, that's something worth recognizing and bringing them on.
Well, big fans of Steve, big fans of Bridgeport Police Department. But dude want to, like, I think what's interesting is, like, you still have it on your email. What was your racing number back in the day?
It was, so my email is Josh Henry 317. And so the 317 is actually a Bible verse, John 3:17. And at the racetrack, you can only technically have a 2-digit number on your car. Well, there was already a number 37. And so I incorporated the 1 in the middle, which you can do, just kind of differentiate between the two competitors. And of course, everyone knows John 3:16, for God sent his only son into the world, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but live eternal life. And then John 3:17 is, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And so that's equally as important as 3:16.
I think that's a, numbers have meaning, and it was cool to see that, your racing number was more than just a number to you.
Mhm.
And to kind of double back, people might not understand. You were like a race car driver.
Yes.
for I guess. Did you start off like as a little kid? Like, how did you get into?
So, like, I was watching dirt track racing ever since I was little. And growing up, I watched it at a track in Beaver, Oklahoma, and I had a buddy there. His name's Carson Love. He was driving this sparkly blue Ford Pinto number 3, and always loved going to watch him. And then after the races, we'd go in the pits, and they're long gone, but there was pictures of me sitting in his car, and it's always been a fascination of mine to want to do that. And so when we moved to Canadian, we ended up going to some races in Amarillo, and they had a beginner class, and it was for essentially, 4-cylinder cars. And most of the ones there were either Pinto or Mustang. And of course, you got to be at least 14 to be able to start that. And I was 13, and I hit up my buddy Carson. He's like, "Yeah, I still have that old Mustang I used to race. It's just sitting out in the wheat field, just having a weed through up through it." I was like, "Well, I want to give it a shot and get into it." And he goes, "Well, man, just come on and check it out, and I'll make you a heck of a deal." So traveled to Buffalo, where I used to live, born and raised, and went and saw the car. He's like, "Man, is this what you're wanting to do?" I was like, "Dude, I'm ready." It's like, just seeing the car is like, I'm ready to get this going. And so he sold me the car, 2 fire suits, a neck roll, helmet, pretty much 95% of what I needed to get, started. And he's like, $500 sound good to you? I was like, let's do it. And that's where it kind of all started. And that's where I learned to drive stick shift.
Then you like raced for several years, right?
So I raced there at Amarillo, and that was pretty much the only track I consistently raced at. And I raced there for 3.5 years. The first 2.5, 3 really. I raced in the beginner course called Pony Stocks. And that Pinto I mentioned earlier, I raced it literally 4 races towards the end of one season. And ended up hitting the wall on the championship night. So totaled it, crinkled it up the middle, and had to rebuild a brand new car. Had a friend there in Amarillo, whose boys I raced with them. They had a bone stock Pinto sitting out in the field, so I bought it off them, and that's where I had to learn pretty much the whole process of building a race car, and got it built. Was able to start the next season, which would have been 2008, I believe, and got going there. Or some, pretty sure I got that date wrong. Anyway, I raced that for a full season and was able to pretty much keep it on the straight and narrow, not tear up the car. And the next full season, I ended up winning track champion. And I didn't really win a whole lot of races. It's just one of those things you got to finish consistent and actually finish races. Don't get a DNF, which do not finish. And that's pretty much how I was able to hold on to the championship. Championship night, I ended up winning the A main and, of course, the track champion. And that's a whole nother feeling to be able to win a championship in something like that. You got a lot of adrenaline rushing through you. So they bring down a checker flag so you can do a hot lap around the track. And I had a few people saying, I was like, I think you were driving a lot faster on your little championship hot lap than you were during the race. Of course, I had to pedal down to the floor. I was on cloud nine. Then from there, I ended up stepping up because in a beginner class, if you win a championship, they're like, okay, you need something more competitive. So I stepped up into what's called the Cyclones and ended up driving a Chevy Malibu. I raced there for half a season before I had my accident.
Don't you drive a Chevy Malibu, Austin?
I too drive the Chevy Malibu. I'm sure a little different than what Josh had going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's an interesting lifestyle of people that are into the racing community. It seems like it's a lot of travel, a lot of expenses.
That's for sure. I mean, it's several months out of the year, and you're traveling there every weekend. So for us, from Canadian to Amarillo, it's a solid 2-hour drive. So you either go there, race, and stay the night, or you're driving a round trip. And so we ended up having a few racing buddies that we'd stay with over the weekend. That way we're not driving home at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And because you're definitely sleep deprived by that time and don't want to be driving home on some sleep deprivation.
Can you kind of, I mean, I've never like been behind the wheel of a legitimate like fast car before.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain like what the physical impacts are of racing? Because I know that's like a big thing in F1, like losing a ton of weight in a race.
Yeah.
What is like the actual, I guess you can go physical and like what's going on through your mind when you're racing?
Yeah. So it's not really, depending on the class you run in, like the one I was in when I was in pony stocks, it wasn't too physically demanding. It was a 4-cylinder car, so you're really not going all that fast, but it definitely takes some upper core strength because when you're going around the corners, you're either drifting around the corner or you're taking it pretty fast. And if you're not holding on, you're pretty much shoving yourself into the right side of your seat. And plus, most of the cars had power steering, so steering wasn't that bad, but there were times where it would go out, and so you'd have that added strength needed to get around the corners. But I mean, there was days that, of course, this is up in the Panhandle where it's a lot of dry heat, which down here it's dry and humidity. But when it was hot, it was hot inside the car because we have either a 1 or 2 piece fly suit, which is the thickness of the fire suit. And if you're wearing a thicker fire suit, you're going to be sweating a lot. So at the end of the night, you're going to be you would have lost a lot of water weight just in sweating. So you got to definitely stay hydrating. That's one of the physical impacts on it, really. But once you got into the bigger cars, you've got more power in your engine. So you want to be smart about how you handle your car. And if you kind of get a little cocky, you can probably find yourself either over the embankments or on your top if you're not paying attention. Those cars were, like I say, a lot funner to race, more power. Of course, going from a 4-cylinder to a 350 big block, it's a big difference in horsepower. But as far as that goes, mentally, you got to be in your right mind. If you're not in it, you're going to find yourself wrecking a lot. If you're having a bad day, you're just going to not really be in the mood to really want to be competitive. And I didn't really find myself in that situation much because you pretty much race for the fans. You got to give them a show. You got to give them what they paid for. So anytime you can give them a good race, that's pretty much the biggest deal at the end of the night.
13 or so years ago, you were preparing, or maybe just had finished a race when you suffered a spinal cord injury. Can you walk me through? I think a lot of people may assume that you were racing vehicles,
right? Yeah.
That might have been like a direct relation
result
of the injury, but
Mhm.
honestly, when I looked at your Facebook profile, that's what I assumed.
Right.
So will you just walk us through just the injury, what happened?
Yeah, for sure. So it was an off week at the track, kind of like a bye week in football. And, like I said, we were always in Amarillo racing. And so we decided to take a trip there for the weekend, just do some shopping, hang out, see some friends and whatnot, since we're not going there and, having to race, get to relax now. And pretty much any hotel we go to, I'd always want to have a swimming pool there because I'm a big water bug. I love to swim. I love to be in the water. I'd swim in a lake, pool, wherever there was body water, I was pretty much in it swimming. And so we stayed at a hotel in Amarillo. I forget what the street is, but it was just down the street from the Northwest Trauma Center, which is a major trauma unit there in Amarillo. And didn't know that, of course, till later. And we get there in the afternoon. I had to work that day, so I worked from about 8 to, I want to say, 3 in the afternoon. So drive to Amarillo, check into our hotel. And by that time, it's already like 5 o'clock or so. So dinner time. And we ended up going to a place called 575 Pizza, ate dinner. And then out of all of us, my dad was the only one that forgot to, pack a swim trunk. So we had to go to Walmart. Of course, I don't think he had already planned on swimming anyway, but it's like, you got to go get you some swim trunks. And we were getting towards the end of the, summer season, I guess you could say. So a lot of the swimwear was on clearance. So we go and we find this one, size of swim trunks, and his size is red. Anyway, we get back to the hotel and it's probably 7 or so by this time. And when I got home or got to the room, I was like, I'm already ready to go swimming. I was like, heck with letting food digest. Let's go. Got my swim trunks on, went to the swimming pool, and I forget how long I was there, but eventually my dad joins, and with my nephew, he was 3 months old at the time. And was swimming. They were at one end, I was at the other. And of course, it being his first time playing in the water, my dad's, taking photos, videos, and whatnot. I was like, hey, Dad, film me doing a belly flop. And of course, as many people know, hotel swimming pools at that are already pretty small. So instead of jumping like the length of the pool, I ended up jumping the width. And being 6'4", I jump in and I land about midway in the pool and then skim across the rest of the way and hit the concrete wall on the other side and fractured my C5, C6 vertebrae in my neck. Of course, at the time, I didn't know what happened. Kind of one of those deals, you hit your head and you see little flashes of light. You're like, okay, I'm good. I'll face this. I'll walk this off. Well, like I go to turn myself over and my legs aren't moving, my arms aren't moving. So it's like, what's going on? And so I'm conscious looking at the bottom of the pool. And it's like, okay, this is kind of scary. I didn't freak out or anything, but my dad, I guess, looks up and sees me just floating there. He's like, oh, he's just holding his breath. What teenagers do. It's not how long he can hold his breath, but that wasn't the case. And a little bit more time goes by and he starts yelling at me. Of course, I'm not able to turn myself over. At the same time, my sister walks in and he's like, hey, jump in the pool, push your brother aside. Something's wrong. And so sister pushes me to the edge of the pool. And with my nephew in one arm, he pulls my 6'4" butt, 245 pounds out with one arm. And it seems like, I guess, according to him, not long after that, the ambulance arrives. And when he's pulling me out of the water, that's when I go unconscious. I black out. And after that, I really don't know what happens. And wake up probably 2.5 weeks later or so in ICU in the hospital. But
one of the people that was crucial in saving my life that day was a paramedic named John Bennett. So not long after my dad pulled me out of the water and got me breathing again because I had lost consciousness, there's a guy tapping him on the shoulder and saying, "We have him from here." And once John and his crew got me stabilized and dropped off at the hospital, you'd think that's where the interaction stopped. But it wasn't. He continued to check in on me and stop by the hospital and see how I was doing either before or after he got off shift. And even after I was transferred to Baylor for rehab, he would continue to check in on my parents and see how I was doing. And 2 years later, he actually showed up to my high school graduation in his air evac jumpsuit because he was a flight paramedic. And, 12 years later, we've stayed in contact and we get to meet up every now and then in Amarillo when we're passing through and take some pictures and catch each other up on what's going on in our lives and kind of reminisce over the memories we've made over the years.
Well, I mean, I don't know how, I would react in that situation. I don't think I would have taken it as greatly as you have, but
no.
From just getting to know you over the years, I feel like you've, just because you've had this injury, it hasn't stopped you from, living a great life and being super positive. Kind of where does that come from?
So kind of backtrack about a couple of days before I had my accident. I went to church at First Baptist Canadian, and we had approved a budget to do some renovations on the church. And so that day, we was kind of doing some cleaning up on the outside of the building. And my task was to sand down and grind down the handicap rails to have them, prepped and ready to repaint. And I kind of tell people, I think, in my opinion, that was kind of a sign from God saying, "Hey, you're probably going to be using this here soon." And, growing up, I was pretty much raised in the church, going to church all the time. And so I was pretty heavily connected to the church and had a pretty, good relationship, I feel, with my faith. And so went on from there. So a couple days later, have my accident. And then, 2.5 weeks or so, whatever it was later, I wake up in the ICU. And during that time, my spinal cord doctor that did my surgery on my neck, he's like, either, I'm going to tell him what happened, or you guys need to tell him. I'm talking about my parents, because they were kind of holding off on wanting to tell me, because I was like, why do my arms feel so heavy? Because they felt like 100 pounds each, like I could barely lift them. And that was when they were like, okay, yeah, we got to tell him. And they ended up telling me, you had a spinal cord injury, you damaged some nerves in your neck, fractured C5, C6. And of course, at that time, being a teenager, I really don't understand the whole dynamics of how the spinal cord works. But hearing paralyzed, it's like, yeah, okay, you're not going to be able to move your arms, legs, whatnot. And from what the doctor said, you're never going to walk again, stuff like that. Of course, the doctors can't really give you a quote unquote glimpse of hope, like any positivity. They got to be a kind of pretty much cut and dry kind of thing. And so pretty much took it. I didn't really get emotional or anything like that. I never cried. It's like, okay, so we just pretty much go on from here. You got to take it with a grain of salt and be positive about it, because literally I could have drowned. Had my dad not been there, I could have very well drowned and not be here today. So God gave me a second chance, and I've been doing my best to make the most of it. And with that, I've been, like you said already, stayed positive through most of it. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not been an easy track, an easy journey. That's been 12 years ago, and pretty much, got to stay positive, because if not, what I've told people is there's one of two ways I could have taken it. Either, taking a track of being happy, positive, God gave me a second chance, I'm going to do my best to make the most of it. Or, lay around, mope, be mad, upset, cry, poor me, and have self-pity. But what kind of life would that be? I mean, nobody wants to live a life in darkness, because there's not much for you there. So I'd rather be positive and try to, show others and be inspirational that, hey, even though you may be going through something pretty crappy and bad, there's always a reason for it.
Well, I think, interests changed over the years, but
Mhm.
I feel like part of your interest in sports broadcasting was, the chance to kind of still be around
Mhm.
competition, right?
Right.
Was that part of kind of how you kind of identified radio broadcasting as potential passion?
Well, it wasn't my initial interest, but growing up, my dad was a volunteer firefighter, and he was a volunteer for 15 years in Buffalo, where I was born. And so growing up, I got to see that, and there were a few times where if my mom wasn't at home and he gets paged out to like a fire or something, I'm pretty much drugging along for the ride. So getting to see that and getting to experience it, and there was a few times on some grass fires where I sat in his lap while he was driving. And back then it was kind of legal to drive in, fight fire from the driving seat because, not many firefighters at that time. But he would hand me the hose and I get to squirt the fire. So that's kind of where I got my passion for that. And that's what I wanted to do, was be a firefighter. And I had a buddy from church, Shane Wright. I guess he had a friend down in Fort Worth who was a fire captain, I believe, for the Fort Worth Fire Department, and told him about my interest in me being a firefighter. And he said, well, I'll pay for his college. And I was wanting to go to OSU Fire Academy in Stillwater. Said, well, once he graduates, he'll come work under me, and I've also got a business on the side. He can work for me, to help where he needs to get a job. And pretty much had everything lined out, and then had my spinal cord injury. So that pretty much dashed the hopes of being a firefighter out the window. And from there, since I was, loved racing in college football, decided to go down the broadcasting path and going that route. And so moved to Bridgeport, and ended up getting into Weatherford College, Weiss County, and did all my basics as much as I could do there. And then ended up transferring to University of North Texas in Denton, and initially was going to do communications as my degree. They're like, if you're wanting to do broadcasting, you need to switch over to like converged broadcast media or something like that. So you're actually doing on-screen type stuff. And that's what I did. And so transferred to UNT in 2017 and went through college and worked for the radio station there, KNTU, and did sports broadcasting for pretty much a full semester and a half, I want to say, covering local sports, of course, UNT, all the major sports in DFW, Rangers, Stars, Cowboys, and was an on-air host, and got to do that. And then did some Green Guys Tailgate show towards the end of my KNT career, where we do about a 30-minute show before every home game there at UNT. And my senior year, of course, to get a degree in broadcast media, you have to have a internship in order to graduate. So I ended up I had some people that I knew at the ticket there in Dallas, and hit up my sources, so to speak, and was able to get an internship. Of course, this is in January of 2020. And so I would drive back and forth to Dallas 3 days a week. It was about a 45-minute drive one way. So leave my dorm around 10 o'clock or so, get to the station, get all my stuff set up, because I would be doing audio editing. So whenever they would do their sports segments, depending on what they were talking about, I would go in, download the audio, cut out commercials, and then upload it to their website. And did that for, 3 months. And coming out of spring break in March, COVID hits. And thankfully, I was able to continue on with my internship and do it remotely, since everything I did was over the internet. And of course, a lot of people in the same degree field as mine, both converged broadcast media and media arts, they lost their internship because, as you guys know, people were getting laid off, people taking pay cuts and all sorts of stuff, working remotely. And thankfully got to, like I say, keep my internship. Graduated in May of 2020 and was kind of in limbo for a year before I met up with Steve at the church, and went from there to volunteering at the PD.
I think you're technically the last intern class for the ticket. They haven't had interns since then. So that's a mark on history right there.
Hey,
You're on the
right.
last intern class. That's cool.
Oh yeah. I mean, I really enjoy doing it. I got to know a lot of the guys there. And of course, I think my favorite personality there was Corby Davidson. He's always a trip. He's always cutting up, and
You'll have some shared cheering interests, right? Big OU fans.
Yep, exactly right.
Okay. Saw a good one this weekend, right? Nice little comeback against Auburn.
Yeah, that was a very anxiety-ridden game.
Yeah, so Josh has a unique perspective just on life, on sports, on OU football, on obviously with his dad being a firefighter too. I think he's gonna, in his time with Bridgeport PD, what a Swiss Army knife of a guy to help out with our podcast.
Absolute utility player to a T. Yeah, can do a little bit of everything, which again, could not be more happy and pleased to have a guy of his caliber and skills, and just a high character guy as well. So super excited. And this is just a glimpse of what you're going to get if you subscribe to the Wise Up podcast.
Yeah, it's free.
Yeah, don't subscribe to the paper and you'll get the podcast for free.
Oh yeah. That's a package combo. But no, so I mean, not a ton is going to change between the podcast that you've seen before and what you see now, except for just a better product. We're still going to have guests on. I think on this episode, you might hear a little bit more about what Tough Enough to Wear Pink Cancer Center is doing in Wise County, and just kind of a general highlight of Breast Cancer Awareness Month and some of the big things going on in our community. But yeah, with Josh is going to be leading the way for us on these interviews. I hope that you got to ask the questions, man.
Yeah, his title is lead anchor.
Anchor.
Just gave it to him right now. I hope he's okay with that.
Well, let's do it.
All right.
I'm excited.
All right, let's get it, man.
And now we would like to welcome you to our Wise County Sports segment. It's no longer the Micah Minute. It still features Micah, but it's going to be over a minute long. It's just really tough to fit in all the good stuff going on in Wise County Sports into 60 seconds.
And it's hard, too.
And I wanted to jump in the fold, and I know you wanted to jump in the fold as well. So, I think you have a first question that you'd like to fire off for our fabulous sports editor here.
Yeah, I think we're entering week 5, right, Micah?
We're entering week 6.
Week 6, so we're 5 weeks into the season.
Half the season already gone almost.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you learn a lot, going into the season. You don't know, you have a general idea of what team's going to be good, what team's going to be bad, but non-district play, and as they enter into conference play, you get a better idea. So if you could list out a couple teams that you think you have a good idea of, what they can accomplish. It's difficult to kind of gauge, I guess, a Decatur who played such a tough schedule. But yeah, if you could, what are some of the teams that they've been impressive so far?
Really impressed with Northwest. You jump into 6A, especially in that district where South Lake Carroll, Byron Nelson, Eaton, a lot of in-district rivals for Northwest, but also the Keller districts as well. Some of the big Metroplex districts. They're 4-0 coming off their bye week. They're going to be back in action this Friday, but they're also 2-0 in district. Big wins over Keller and a rivalry win over Eaton. That's pretty big. Decatur, as our esteemed editor pointed out, Decatur has started 1-3 before. In fact, they've done it twice, and both times have ended up with state semifinal trip. So we saw a 70-0 blowout win. Two teams not on the same level, but a good 70-0 win over Carter Riverside last week. Maybe gets Decatur going on that path like they've been the past 2 years. Paradise kind of got a little shock early this year, losing the games 2 and 3. Good bounce back win over Vernon last week. VCA, they're 3-1 in a new league as well. They're playing better teams. Going to be jumping into district next week. So their district finales this week. And I just got the line on that. They're only favored by 2. So that's a really close game. So a lot of teams are playing really good competition this year. With good competition, you don't win them all. Sometimes you take those losses early in non-district when you play those good teams in hopes to get better when district gets here and the games count.
I'd like to kind of follow up on a Decatur football with the question here. I'm not so much worried about. Again, we can talk about the 1-3 start as long as we want. It doesn't concern me at all, really. History shows that they can overcome that. I think historically, Decatur football and volleyball have always scheduled tough non-districts because it gets them. They'll go into district play with a 500 record and then run the table in district. Which I'm confident, maybe not as confident in beating Springtown, who beat China Spring, but Decatur, they don't have the top end opponents this year with that Fort Worth district. Does that concern you at all for them going into playoffs, coming off such a non-competitive district schedule with the exception of Springtown? Do you think they're going to, I don't want to say fall flat in playoffs, but do you think it's going to hurt them a little bit going into postseason play?
It not only does it kind of worry me about playoffs, Brendan, but it kind of worries me about that Springtown game as well, because you play all these teams that maybe aren't on your level, your Riverside, your Eastern Hills this week for homecoming, and you kind of get lulled into a sense of security. But then when you get punched in the mouth by a porcupine, that kind of hurts. And I think that's a possibility, but I feel that hopefully Decatur can take these lessons learned, kind of build on momentum. Momentum is everything in sports. This. And, but you got a good Springtown team that's 20 something miles down the road, and they're hungry for it too. They're tired of being beat up by Decatur. That's always a great rivalry. I'm hoping Decatur can win it. I have them picked in my mind as of right now. Of course, we still have a lot of game time until then, but I think that if we can learn lessons and the run game needs help. We had a great explosion of the run game with Jake Milligan last week. 4 carries, 125 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he only didn't score on 1 carry. So that's pretty good, albeit against Carter Riverside. But hopefully you can get those younger guys moving real well, playing real well when you get to that Springtown game, to where that momentum apexes and then you keep going into a playoff run. Hopefully over the state semifinals, get into that state game for the first time in school history.
Micah, you've been covering those games, and last week I was just curious, obviously that Springtown game is going to be a measuring stick for, how this team is rebuilt, how this team has kind of found confidence and seeing kind of where I guess you can look at it 2 ways. Like, you go through a brutal non-district, you could have some easier games and that could, build that confidence up. But how has Huff been handling, just that personnel during those blowouts? Has he been working in other units, I guess? When do you see kind of the second and third stringers come in?
I think we really saw it in the past couple of weeks. Coach Huff trying to get that run game going like we've been talking about. Abram, of course, this year's workhorse, was back up to TCU signee Nate Palmer. But he's got Jamari Fletcher. He's coming off of a arm injury. He's actually been playing with a full arm cast, fingers, arm, elbow, everything. That's apparently coming off soon. And I've been told by a coach that once that cast comes off, all bets are off. So hopefully that happens soon. But Jake Milligan's been a big surprise, of course, with the Riverside game, trying to get those younger guys in. There's been a great connection. They're a year apart, but Jed Ross is a senior quarterback, and Chase Berg is a junior wide receiver. Talked to them after the game on Friday. They're really good friends, have been for a while. That connection has developed this year. It's developed into 9 touchdowns already this year through 5 games. That's really good. In the passing game, you got Abram getting in there as well. Caden Forrest, who's the backup quarterback. A lot of other guys who Coach Huff told me are veteran varsity players in title only because they haven't had a lot of playing time on the field. So now those guys are getting that playing time, and they're trying their best to take over, kind of lead this team as we go down the district stretch.
Do you have any, I I guess, breakout players aside from Decatur, because I think Decatur
Mhm.
has already had and will have more breakout players.
Yeah.
Are there other guys in your mind that have either come to varsity for their first year and
Mhm.
are really making their name known, or some guys that have sat behind
Yeah.
the last couple of years and had some good games through the first 5 weeks? Who are some of those guys in your mind?
I think you've covered some of them, especially when you went to Bridgeport for a couple of games. But that brotherly connection, Ryan and help me real quick, Ryan and
Dylan Hunter.
Dylan Hunter, yes. Dylan Hunter is the new quarterback for Bridgeport, and he's done pretty well under center. But of course, you got a family connection. You're already real good with your brother, and now your brother's your teammate. So just builds on that. Boyd has Will McIntyre, new quarterback. His brother was quarterback last year, Braden, doing pretty well. But they also have a young receiver who I believe last week was second in receiving in Wise County. Boyd's record may not show it, but he was. Major Jennings doing really good and catching balls from Will McIntyre. Paradise, you had Aiden Winters out. You throw in Aiden Alade. He's doing really well in his first year. Of course, you need an Aiden Winters on the field, on the sidelines. Morale boost big time. Paradise also has Luke Brown, and you got to see that last week, Brendan, with fantastic 2-touchdown game. Alvord, I don't know what's going on, but I'm seeing a little Zane. It's not Zane Fuentes, it's Zane Smith. Zane Smith has kind of emerged as a leading receiver for Alvord this year. Of course, you still got Dalton George, kind of a dual threat quarterback. Chico, you got Carrington Ransom, you got Hayden Johnson, and both of those two kids combined for almost 250 yards rushing last week. Kind of a 1-2 tandem in that backfield. Always end up on the polls, the player of the week polls, because they're doing pretty good. So those two guys are doing good. Northwest, Ryder Norton, new quarterback. He's commanding that offense very well with Kobe Wall as a receiver, Nate John in the backfield. And then for VCA, you have Leighton Huddleston, who's the quarterback. They don't throw it that much, more of a run, but you have Jaron Martin and freshman. Watch out for this kid, freshman Jaden Donald. I believe 2 games ago, because they had a bye last week, at 200-something yards rushing. I think it was 267 as a freshman. That's pretty good.
Related to Aaron Donald?
Maybe. But Wise County's really full of breakout football stars this year, and hopefully we can see some postseason success because of it, or at least some building years for the younger kids.
Okay, I had a little technical difficulty. I had some batteries switching out to do, but be remiss if we did not talk about volleyball, another great sport that always has, we've had multiple championships from some teams here locally, and you still have a Decatur squad that's undefeated through district for
5 games.
Is this the 3rd season in a row?
No, they've
5th?
been undefeated in district since the 2020 season.
Okay, so I was just completely wrong.
Yeah. Coach
But
Forrester was here for 4 years, undefeated through all her time, 5-0 right now under Stormy Snyder.
So Tuesday they host Crum.
I do. Yep.
And then Friday, we got a really interesting matchup because Catherine Forrester, like you mentioned, former coach of Decatur and took that team to great heights. She's returning as a visitor for the first time in her career with the new high school, Eagle Mountain in EMS ISD. What are your thoughts just in general on that game? And is this undefeated district record, are they putting it on? They put it on the line every game, but do you think it's going to be under more like pressure, more scrutiny this time around, do you think?
I think this is the first week of 2 where it's going to be really tough for Decatur. And of course, the second one is going to be the rematch week between Crum at Crum and Eagle Mountain at Eagle Mountain. Because it's great that they're coming to you the first time, but then you got to go on the road and win at both of their houses, which is tough. Crum's always a good opponent. Crum's always in the playoffs. Usually that second, third, kind of right there. but always seems like they give Decatur their best match ever. That's at home Tuesday at 6:00. Coming off of, we talked about in the football segment, there's some games where there's kind of sleeper games, lull games. Lake Worth, I can't remember who they played Friday, but played Lake Worth last week. So those games where it's easy, they played Burt Burnett Friday, and Decatur mowed over Burt Burnett. One of the sets was 25-5. That's pretty bad. But you don't want to be lulled into that sense of security, like we said, and then lose at home big time. So hopefully Lady Eagles bring that on Tuesday. Friday, I am kind of jealous that you're going, because it's going to be pretty much a packed house. I'm predicting it will be a tough match. I've seen Eagle Mountain scores when they play other Wise County teams this year in the tournaments and stuff. It's pretty good team Catholic Forester has, and it's a first year team. So you really don't have that measuring stick to gauge where they're at. You just got to go out there and play them. I think this is going to be a really tough week. I'm hoping Decatur comes out 2-0 this week. But that could be a jeopardy in either match, because that's the two strongest teams plus Decatur in this district.
Well, I know, to switch it back to football, you listed off a lot of the players who are leading, in the stats. I think one thing we would like to recognize on this podcast is the guys in the trenches.
Mm-hmm. Big guys.
The
my people.
Micah's people.
That's right.
My people too.
Getting there to my people.
So Brendan, I think you do you have an idea? Do you have a football guy of the week?
So I know we talked about big guys in the trenches, and this guy, he technically is in the trenches. He's not the biggest dude. He comes from Paradise, which Paradise historically doesn't have, the largest teams. They are generally more athletic and speedy. I mean, this might be one of the fastest teams in 3A this year. And not always, the greatest depth. So there is a guy that looks like he should be playing outside receiver, who starts on O-line and at D-line and outside linebacker on the edge. And that is Landon Morrison, number 55 at Paradise. Dude is just an absolute game breaker. He's super fast around the edge. He's good on just going straight at the quarterback on the blitz, on a bull rush, on any kind of move at the line. But he also has the speed to contain anything on the outside. Absolute workhorse, blue collar kid. And again, not only is he working his tail off against some of these bigger, tackles on the defensive side, but then he also has to march down the field and lead a team that I think they only passed the ball 10 times last week. It's a predominantly, rushing attack from Paradise. And, he's starting on the O-line, and he's like a skinny dude, but Paradise's point of attack is great still. And he's also a guy that he's probably going to be bleeding by the end of the game. He's got the nasal strip, which always looks sick. And he's got a sweet mullet too. So, and just like not like dirty, but just like a gnarly player, if that makes sense. He's gonna, he'll pick his teammates up after the play, every single play. He'll back him up. He's always gonna, if he's not the first on a tackle, he's gonna clean someone up. So just kind of a do-it-all kid. And
I will tell you this. I will tell you this. Just finished stat leaders for this week. If you take out VCA private school, Landon Morrison leads all Wise County public schools in sacks this year with 5 through 5 games.
And it's hard to come off we saw a you might even call it a historic season last year with Kobe Dickens.
Technically historic.
Maybe there's a good chance he will be the greatest football player that I will ever watch play in Wise County High School. But it's hard to live with those expectations. But Landon Morrison is carrying on that tradition of just solid defense and getting after the quarterback and getting tackles for loss. So I guess this is technically week 1 happening for week 5. Wise County Football Guy of the Week, Landon Morrison, Paradise High School.
Lock it in. Thanks, Micah.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wise Up podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode.